Well, this has been quite some week with the things that have gone on. And it looks like that a lot of people are going to start getting terrorist attack fatigue. Seems as though we have one every day, every week rather. And you stop and think about the economic cost of those at the place where it occurs, and France just got hit again. And then the coup started yesterday in Turkey. Now, all of these things are going to work out for good in the long run. But it's really quite a situation when you have this going on and people saying, well, what is Europe going to do? Okay, then you have the Brits leaving. We'll have to see how that goes. And Margaret Thatcher, number 2, is the new prime minister. What is her name? Elizabeth May?
Theresa May.
Theresa May. Okay. She looks like she'll be a Thatcher number 2. I was just told that she did a wonderful deed the very first thing she got in there. She closed down the climate change cabinet or the department or whatever it is. And all the lies for climate change worldwide have been coming where? Right out of there. Now, so we look at all of these things and we don't know exactly how it's working out, but there's one thing for sure, we know we're marching closer and closer toward the end time. And people get all excited when things happen and different things take place. Now, I don't know what we're going to hear about the attempted coup in Turkey, but know one thing, that when these things happen, it's lining things up more and more for the end time events. This may be a step 1 or step 2 or step 3. We don't know how long. Okay? Now, you stop and think about it, and you look at Revelation. Oh, before we get there, I was reminded that Darlene wasn't able to come, but she told Ken that the coup and the announcing of the vice president candidate Mike Pence happened on the 9th day of the 4th month. And isn't it interesting, he had to delay it one day. Amazing how those things work. And this morning, 8 o'clock, Dolores, to make sure I was awake, she said, Trump is going to be on and present the vice president pick. Okay, so I wanted to watch that. So I turned on the television and watched it. And it was really quite a good presentation, the whole thing. Even what Trump spoke about and so forth, but Hillary has no place to hide with Trump around, that's for sure. But what impressed me was that Mike Pence looks like really a very good man as far as the world and America is concerned. And he said something that is very interesting. He said, I'm a Christian first, though that's Protestantism, conservative second, and a Republican third. Well, that's better than having someone who favors Allah and the Muslims and those who have no moral standards. And that's what's been running the country for the past 7 years, now going on 8. Now, what does this tell us? Now, this tells us, do we have more time? The answer probably is yes, because a lot of things have to happen. So we're going to get an overview of that today. I was also reminded that the 9th day of the 4th month is when the Babylonians breached the wall in Jerusalem. So significant events tend to repeat themselves. Now, this is not a parallel with that, but it's a significant day. Okay? Now, I got a phone call yesterday. Very interesting. The two witnesses are here already in Jerusalem. I said, no, they're not. Said, yes, they are. They're working in the dig. And I said, no, they're not. Okay. Now, how can I know for sure that they are not here? Okay. We'll do a little study today on that, plus study of the end time events, and get a framework as to how these things are going to happen. Okay? So let's go to Revelation 11. We'll start there. Very interesting. Revelation 11. Now, remember this. When talking about the Bible, when all else fails it, open it and read it. Because too many mistakes are made just talking. All right? Now then, verse 1. Then the angel gave me a measuring rod like a staff, saying, Arise and measure the temple of God and the altar and those who worship in it. But leave out the court that is within the temple, or temple area. Do not measure it, because it has been given over to the Gentiles, and they shall trample upon the holy city for 42 months. Now, there are two parallels with this, all right? But let's focus on what has to be in place first, before the two witnesses. It tells us the temple has to be there first, right? Okay. Now, even the Jews have not come to the conclusion where the proper place to build the temple actually is. Some few understand that. I've explained it many times. It's not the Mosque of Omar. Okay. If they tried to build it where the Mosque of Omar is, and some of the Jews say, well, God is going to cause an earthquake and destroy it. Well, how are you going to build a temple on an earthquake fault line then, huh? See? Now, we will see when we come to Matthew 24 a little bit later that the temple area was quite different and significant. But let's come first of all to Daniel 9. Daniel, the 9th chapter. Now, this has to do with the 70-week prophecy. And this is another overarching beam or pillar, whichever one you want, which tells us about the end-time prophecies. Now, we know that it says, verse 24, let's come here. 70 weeks are determined upon your people and upon the holy city to finish the transgression, to make an end of sin, to make reconciliation for iniquity, and to bring in everlasting righteousness, and to seal up the vision and prophecy, and to anoint the most holy. Okay? Now, as we look at this is talking about beginning with the time of Daniel and ending when? When Christ returns. Okay? His second coming. Now then, he breaks it down into increments. And this is what is important. Lots of times you get an overall framework over here, or maybe an overall framework right within the context, which then you can call a preview or whatever, and then you get the details to follow later. So let's read some of the details. Know therefore and understand that from the going forth of the commandment to restore and to build Jerusalem to Messiah the Prince shall be 7 weeks and 62 weeks. That's 69 total, 2 segments. And it shall be built again with streets and walls, even in troublous times. So the first 7 weeks are devoted to the things in rebuilding the temple, and we find the account of that in Ezra and Nehemiah. Now, verse 26. And after 62 weeks shall Messiah be cut off, but not for himself. However, when you follow this through in historical flow, there is a break of time between the completion of the temple and the coming of Christ and his subsequent crucifixion. Now we have all of this explained. If you don't have the book, The Appointed Times of Jesus the Messiah, you write for it, because we lay it all out, how all of that happened. Okay? Now, and the people of the prince shall come, who shall come, shall destroy the city and the sanctuary, but his end shall be with a flood, and unto the end of the war desolations are determined. Now, this is interesting because Jerusalem was destroyed in 70 AD, and we need to keep that in mind. However, this is not talking about that one, because a certain event had to take place which did not occur when that happened. Okay? However, if you are a Jew, and as we will see when we get to Matthew 24 and Mark 13 and Luke 21, that the events as they flow along, it looks like they come just one after another, one after another, one after another. In some cases, that's true. And you will go along, and then you will hit a point which will tell you an estimation or an exact event that will take place that's going to happen. Okay? So after 62 weeks, doesn't say how long after, that's all explained in the book. And the people of the prince who shall come shall destroy the city and the sanctuary. That's what happened in 70 AD. But what did we read in Revelation 11? There has to be a temple. Okay? And we will see that's also keyed in Matthew 24. And his end shall be with a flood. Unto the end, end of the war, desolations are determined. And he shall confirm a covenant. This is not referring to Christ. This is referring to the one who is the prince that the people want. Okay, the prince of the people. He shall confirm a covenant with many for 1 week. That's important. So there will be a specific time when that last 70th week, and each week is a 7-day period in 7-year period rather in history. Okay, so at the beginning of the last 7 years, there has to be something that takes place where there is a covenant. And why would this covenant be necessary? So that the temple could be built. See? Now, just put in your notes there, 1 Thessalonians, the 5th chapter, verses 1 and 2. When they shall say, peace and safety, then sudden destruction comes upon them. Okay? Now, we've never had a time of peace. Never. All right, let's continue on here. And in the midst of the week, he shall cause the sacrifice and offering to cease. Now, this could also, because this is talking about the personage to do it, could you have one person be the one who work out the peace, and then all of a sudden another person arise in the middle of the week and stop it? I don't know, so I'll ring my bell. Okay? Possible. And upon the wing of abominations shall come one who makes desolate even unto the consummation. That is the end of the age. And a fully determined end which is decreed shall be poured out upon the desolate. Okay? Now then, what makes the desolation? Well, before we answer that, let's come to Matthew 24. Matthew 24. Now let's do an overview of Matthew 24, Mark 14, and Luke 21. So you might want to put some markers there so you can go in between. Mark 13, not 14, beg your pardon. Mark 13, okay. Now then, these chapters have a time span. So we need to look at the overall time span. From 30 AD until the resurrection. Now that's a long time, isn't it? Okay? So let's read the first two verses here, and then we'll go to Mark 13. Matthew 24 and verse 1. And after going out, Jesus departed from the temple, and his disciples came to him to point out the buildings of the temple. But Jesus said to them, do you not see all these things? Truly I say to you, there shall not be left here even a stone upon a stone that shall not be thrown down. Now, anyone who can read that ought to understand this tells us that the temple could not be where the Mosque of Omar is. Why? Because it's sitting on stones that are all stacked upon each other, big, heavy stones, right? All right? And if that is the place of the temple, then Jesus' words are not true. Since Jesus' words are true and will take place and will come to pass, that means the Mosque of Omar area is not where the temple will be. And if you look into history, what do you find? That was Roman property with the Fort Antonio, right next to the temple, because that's where the riots always started. Okay? Now, let's read Mark 13, verse 1. And when he was going out of the temple, one of his disciples said to him, Master, see these splendid stones, how splendid the stones and the buildings are. Then Jesus answered and said to him, do you see all these great buildings? Or do you see these great buildings? There shall not be left a stone upon a stone that shall not be thrown down. Now notice verse 3. Okay? Here they are walking out of the temple. Now you walk out of the temple and you go eastward, and the first thing you do is climb the Mount of Olives. And Jesus would always spend time on the Mount of Olives. Verse 3, and as he was sitting on the Mount of Olives across from the temple, Peter and James and John and Andrew, the two brothers, John and James, and the two brothers, Peter and Andrew, came to him privately and asked him. Now, what does this tell you? Remember the sermon I gave on the Jesus transcribers? They knew it was important, so they were marking down all the things they needed to mark down. Okay? Now, let's come back over here to Matthew 24. And there are three things that this will cover, beginning in verse 3. And as he was sitting on the Mount of Olives, his disciples came to him alone, saying, tell us, when shall these things be? It'd be astonishing, right? You see, the beautiful temple, and of course, coming down to the Kidron Brook, and including the wall of the temple, you're looking at about over 600-foot scale there, see. So they're looking at all of this, and Jesus says, there's going to be one stone left upon another stone. So you'd want to know, when's that going to be? Yes, indeed. Okay. Tell us when these things shall be, number one, and what shall be the sign of your coming, number two, and the completion of the age. Now that ties right in with what? Daniel 9:27. Completion of the age. Okay. Now then, first thing he tells them. Now, what we're going to do is we're going to analyze what is said next, because this is important. Because everything we're going to read, except one major thing, took place when they destroyed the temple in 70 A.D. Now, what happened was this. The Jews rebelled, took over the temple, drove out the Romans, and they were thinking, boy, we're going to take the kingdom back ourselves. They beat the Romans, they beat the Syrians that came down to fight against them, and they thought, wow, we're really going to make it. Well, here comes the Romans under Vespasian and Titus, okay? And they come down, and they begin to lay siege against Jerusalem. Well, in that last year, the Romans were very smart, and the Jews were not very smart. The word went out, we have the temple area, God will help us, the Messiah will come, everybody come to Jerusalem for this Passover. Now in Jerusalem, you can read this in Josephus, they had enough food to last 4 or 5 years. In case of war or siege, all stored away. Okay? But so many Jews came, over 2 million came into Jerusalem. The Romans were smart, they let them all come in. Okay? Now what does that do to the food supply? Okay? So think about it. All right? Now then, let's read on and see the events. Picture yourself beginning in 30 A.D. as one of the disciples of Jesus Christ. And you had now all this written down just like we have it. Okay? And then beginning in about 63 A.D., these things began to happen. Actually, some of them beginning right after Jesus was resurrected. Okay? So let's read what follows. Verse 4, then Jesus answered and said to them, be on guard so that no one deceives you. For many shall come in my name, saying, I am the Christ, and they shall deceive many. You shall hear of wars and rumors of wars. All these things happen. Okay? Who is the first false prophet that came along saying that Christ was the Christ, but I'm his representative? Simon Magus, Acts the 8th chapter. Okay? And then after that, many false teachers. Okay? You shall hear of wars and rumors of wars going on all the time. See that you do not let these things disturb you. For it is necessary that all these things take place, but the end is not yet. For nation shall rise against nation. The Greek there's ethnos, which can also mean race against race. And kingdom against kingdom, and there shall be famines and pestilence and earthquakes in different places. Now all these things are the beginning of sorrows. Did they have a lot of sorrows around Jerusalem, Judea, and in that area with all of this going on with the Romans there? Yeah, you read Josephus' account. Boy, they had so many crosses they couldn't kill them fast enough. It was an amazing thing. Jerusalem was a bloody, terrible place to be. All right? You shall be hated by all nations for my name's sake. Then shall many be led into sin and betray one another and shall hate one another, and many false prophets shall arise and deceive many. And because lawlessness shall be multiplied, the love of many shall grow cold. But the one who endures to the end, that one shall be saved. Now you could say, going through all of this, leading up to 70 AD, you could say, yes, 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 yes. Those things took place. Okay? All right, now let's read on. Beginning in verse 13 is a transition. The one who endures to the end. Now there are two ends. Number one, the end of your life. Be faithful. Number two, the end of the age, and if you're still alive, then you'll be transformed when Christ returns, right? We know that from other scriptures, but those weren't written when he was saying this. Now notice verse 14. Now we have a transition. And the gospel of the kingdom shall be proclaimed in all the world for a witness to all nations, then shall the end come. Well, to them, the world was a civilized Roman Empire. So to them, they look at that. Did they have Paul? Did they have all the other apostles going out everywhere and preaching? Yes, indeed. So you could look at that and say, yeah, boy, it's going to happen. Therefore, verse 15, very key, important thing. This ties in with what we read about the abomination. When it says the wings of abominations there in Daniel 9:27, I kind of get the picture that in the middle of this peace thing, here comes this man. Or this man was on the scene and his character changes. Has to be one of the two. Okay? Because the abomination of desolation is an important thing. It is the key thing. And this tells us that there's a whole lot of time between the beginning of this chapter and when the abomination of desolation will be set there and when Jesus is going to return. A whole lot of time. But you cannot discern that from the context. It's an impossibility to do so. Okay? So let's look at it, see if we can find some keys here. Okay? Verse 15, therefore, when you see the abomination of desolation that was spoken of by Daniel the prophet standing in the holy place. Key important insertion here. Now, for those who have red letter Bibles, King James Version, I don't know if this next statement is red lettered or not. But Jesus didn't say this. This was put there for a special reason to tell us something very, very important. And we will see as we look at other scriptures that this is telling us at the time that the New Testament was being canonized by John and Philip and the others who were there, that yes, the temple had been destroyed, but what? The abomination of desolation hadn't occurred. See? Now, why is that important? Let's come over here. Okay? Let's come over here to verse 34. Read this. Truly I say to you, this generation, and there are a lot of people who today reject all of the New Testament based upon this verse because they say this generation refers to the generation of Jesus' time when the temple was destroyed then. But that's not so. This generation refers to the end time generation that this will take place. Okay? And here's why. Verse 33, back up one verse. In like manner also, when you see, now notice, all, might circle that, all these things, know that it is near, even at the doors. Okay? All of these things did not happen. Nearly all of them happened. What was the missing thing that did not happen? And why did John and those insert this phrase, the one who reads, let him understand? Okay? We'll answer that question. But let's come back here to verse 16. Then let those who are in Judea flee into the mountains, the one who's in the housetop not come down, and so forth. Woe to the women, verse 19. Don't have your flight in the winter and the Sabbath. Verse 21. Matthew 24, verse 21. Now, was there a lot of tribulation, distress, and misery at the time of the destruction of the temple? Oh, yes. Were there hundreds of thousands of Jews killed? Yes. Okay. For then shall be great tribulation, such as has not been from the beginning of the world until this time of the last generation and the time of these events, nor ever shall be again. Okay? So this tells us that with the destruction of the temple in Jerusalem in 70 AD, the Great Tribulation did not start. Christ did not return because it comes down here showing that he's going to return. Okay? So let's come back here to 2 Thessalonians, the second chapter. Let's see what Paul wrote in his very second epistle. And this is interesting. He wrote this in 51 AD, 19 years before the destruction of the temple. Very interesting. 2 Thessalonians, okay? Chapter 2. Now, why is this important? Because the apostles and the brethren in the first century were thinking that Christ is going to return very soon. And when they began to see all of these things taking place, a lot of them assumed, yeah, boy, Christ is going to return. Okay? But notice that this major event written of, prophesied of, described in Matthew 24 and Mark 14 and Luke 21, never took place. And notice it starts out with the same warning that Jesus gave to the disciples: beware that no one deceives you. Okay? Now, a little sidebar here. How many times have we seen in our experience people saying Christ is going to return real soon? Well, a lot of them. From 1975, then 88, 89, 96, 97. Then we had two witnesses come on the scene, a man and his wife. They never got to Jerusalem, and he ended up in federal prison. Okay? Yet people followed him. Now, verse 1. Now we beseech you, brethren, concerning the coming of our Lord Jesus Christ and our gathering together to him, which is what? The resurrection. Does that not tie in with Matthew 24? The angels are going to gather all the elect? Yes, indeed. That you be not quickly shaken in mind, nor be troubled neither by spirit, nor by word, nor by epistle, as if from us, saying that the day of the Lord is present. Christ is already here. Kind of like that phone call I got yesterday. Two witnesses are already in Jerusalem. Okay. Do not let anyone deceive you by any means. What does that mean? That means we must check everything by Scripture. Okay? Because that day will not come unless the apostasy. Now, this is a worldwide rejection of God. Shall come first. That includes all religions. See? You have there in Revelation 13, coming one world government and one world religion. Okay? And here's the key. The man of sin shall be revealed, the son of perdition. This is what didn't take place in 70 AD. We're reading it here. Now, you're stuck with a problem if you're wondering how this is going to work out and don't know the facts. Are the words of Jesus true? Are the words of Paul true? So this is telling us that it didn't happen in 70 AD. Notice, and if anyone would have written of this, Josephus would have, right? You can be guaranteed that. Notice, if you think Hitler was a narcissist, or Mussolini, but you got to love that chin. Okay. The one who opposes and exalts himself above all, that is called God, or that is an object of worship greater than idolatry, so that he comes into the temple of God. Now, when Paul wrote he comes into the temple of God, this was 19 years before it was destroyed. So he's referring to the temple in Jerusalem that was standing when he wrote this, right? Yes. Okay. Now notice, and prostrates himself down and confesses all of his sin to God. No. and sits down as God, proclaiming that he himself is God. Now, this tells us another thing too, doesn't it? Who has always wanted to be God, to replace the true God? Satan the devil. So this man is fully possessed of Satan the devil at the time that this occurs, correct? Have to be. Do you not remember that when I was still with you, I told you these things, and now you understand what is holding him back in order for him to be revealed in his own set time? So there's a set time for it. But here you are, living through from the time that the church began. You lived through the destruction of Jerusalem. The temple has been destroyed. And you're reading 2 Thessalonians, the 2nd chapter. And you know that that didn't happen. Okay? The only conclusion you can come to with all of this, you can stack up the evidence. Revelation 11, measure the temple. How can you measure the temple if it's not there and there's not one stone upon another one? And Revelation was given in 98 AD when the temple was not there. So how can you measure the temple? You cannot do it. So that tells us there has to be a temple. Since it was destroyed, and this event is not recorded in the Gospels, nor is this event recorded in Josephus, then we have to conclude that it's for yet another time. This is why Paul wrote. He's holding back to be revealed in his set time. For the mystery of lawlessness is already working. The whole system was starting to come up. Only there is one who is restraining at the present time until it arises out of the midst. Now notice when this is going to take place. And that likewise did not happen in 70 AD. Then the lawless one will be revealed, whom the Lord shall consume with the breath of his mouth, and will destroy with the brightness of his coming. Christ hasn't returned. So this temple that the man of sin, the son of perdition, goes into has not yet been built. Now this is why the Jews are preparing to build a temple. And as we've seen some of the things about how they're going to design it and so forth. And if you don't believe that, go on thetempleinstitute.com. They have priest robes, they have bowls, they have the lots, they have everything ready for temple services and sacrifices. Remember, the sacrifices have to be cut off. So that means there has to be a whole new setup, temple again. Okay? Now notice this timing. Will destroy with the brightness of his coming. Where do we find that? Revelation 19, correct? Yes, indeed. All right, so now you can understand that if John understood some of these things, why he would put that parenthetical statement in there. Because he did not know when it was going to occur, because he knew that it hadn't occurred. Okay? Now, verse 9. Even the one whose coming is according to the inner workings of Satan, so he has to be Satan-possessed, with all power and signs and lying wonders, and with all deceivableness of unrighteousness in those who are perishing, because they did not receive the love of the truth, so that they might be saved. For this cause God shall send upon them a powerful deception that will cause them to believe the lie, so that all may be judged who did not believe the truth, but took pleasure in unrighteousness. Now, we'll go ahead and take a break and continue after that. All right, now we have to tie this together with something else, see? This is why you have to look at the scriptures so you won't be deceived. And this is why you have to see the events that are taking place. So let's come backwards on this. Let's first of all come to Revelation 19, because it says that the man of sin, the son of perdition, is going to be destroyed by the brightness of his coming. All right? Let's pick it up here, verse 19. This is Jesus Christ and all the resurrected saints, all educated, renamed, given assignments, given their white horses, and we're all coming down off the sea of glass. Okay? Verse 19, and I saw the beast and the kings of the earth and their armies gathered together to make war with him who sits on the horse and with his army. So we'll be fighting. What did Jesus say? We'll be fighting. What did Jesus say concerning his followers fighting? He said, if my kingdom were of this world, then would my servants fight. Okay? So the kingdom is now of this world when it happens in Revelation 19, and so we're going to fight. Now notice, the beast was taken, with him the false prophet who worked miracles in his presence, by which he deceived those who received the mark of the beast, and those who worshipped his image. Those two were cast alive into the lake of fire, which burns with brimstone. Okay? This is Christ's second coming. So, this shows when the man of sin, the son of perdition, is going to die. All right? Come back here to Revelation 13, because it says that after the workings of Satan, the devil, right? Where do we find this at end time setting? Revelation 13. Now, we don't know how all of this is going to work out. Now, in our lifetime, we had people writing saying that the return of Christ was going to be in 1975. Okay? And in the magazine, there was an article concerning East Europe and Western Europe. Eastern and Western Europe. Okay? Talking about the 10 kings. So it was said in that article, there will be 5 from the west and 5 from the east. Well, we need to think bigger. There is no wall anymore. Now, it's true that Germany is probably going to rise and become a great power. It's also possible that the leader of Europe may become the personage of the beast in Revelation 13. But it's not going to be 10 nations in Europe, because what we're talking about in Revelation and these other things is a whole worldwide setup, so there will be 10 regions. Now, I've said this several times, but I'm going to get a map. There are several versions of the map. the 10 regions. Because why? What does it say there in Revelation 17 concerning the 10 kings? These have received no kingdom of as yet, but they give their kingdom to the beast for 1 hour. Right? Okay? See, so this is going to come together that way. Now then, verse 1, Revelation 13, and I stood on the sand of the sea and saw a beast rising up out of the sea, having 7 heads and 10 horns, and on his horns 10 crowns, and on his heads the name of blasphemy. That's the super elite that run the world. Okay? And they openly worship Satan. And there is evidence that they do participate in human sacrifice. The beast that I saw was like a leopard, so what it does, it combines the types of all the beasts of Daniel, the 7th chapter, showing that this is a conglomerate system put together. It's not a single solitary system like it was with Germany in World War II. And the beast was like a leopard, and his feet like the feet of a bear, his mouth the mouth of a lion, and the dragon gave him his power, his throne, and great authority. Who was the one who said he was God? 2 Thessalonians, the 2nd chapter. The one whose coming is after the workings of Satan with all power and signs and wonders, right? Okay. And I saw one of his heads as if it were slain to death. Now, what is that? What could that be? Well, Dolores and I have had discussions on this, and it could be the system, the political system. The political system could suffer a great loss. Okay? It could also be the individual. Now, let me ring the bell. Since he's going to cut off the sacrifices, because there will be a temple rebuilt and the sacrifices will be started, the Jews will be very happy, right? Yes, this is great, wonderful, marvelous. We have our temple, our sacrifices. And here he comes, knocks off all those sacrifices, has his soldiers remove all the priests and the Levites, and he marches right into the Holy of Holies and stands there, then sits down and says, I am God. Now, what do you think that's going to do to the Jews? Little sidebar. Remember what happened when the Apostle Paul was taken to prison after he came to Jerusalem, and he was being held for a meeting? What happened? 40 Jews took a vow, fasting, that they were going to kill Paul. And Paul's nephew came and told the captain of the guard, and the captain of the guard took him to the commander, and he told the commander, and the commander said, we're moving out tonight. Remember that? Okay. What do you think the Jews are going to do after 2,000 years with no temple, finally have a temple, finally have all the glorious things going on, finally have the sacrifices going, and they are looking for the Messiah to come, because their work to force the Messiah to come was the building of the temple. So here comes this man, cuts off the sacrifices, walks into the temple, sits down in the Holy of Holies, and says, I am God. How many Jews you think are going to organize to get out there to try and kill him? Could it be, so I'll ring my cowbell again, could it be that they form a group, an assassination group, to kill the beast, and they almost succeed? Okay? But the false prophet comes and prays over him, and he comes back to life. Okay? Now, how dramatic do you think that would be? And this on television everywhere, the whole world knowing. Okay? So let's see what happens. But his deadly wound was healed. Politically, that could mean another resurrection of the empire. Okay? Now notice, and the whole world, the whole earth was amazed and followed the beast. And they worshiped the dragon who gave his authority to the beast, and they worshiped the beast, saying, who is like the beast because he's God? Who has the power to make war against him? Look at these Jews. Again, they stopped history. Okay? So there is the ending of the time of peace, right there. And a mouth speaking great things and blasphemies was given to him, and authority was given to him to continue for 42 months, which is 3.5 years. What happened in the middle of that last week? Daniel 9. Boom. The peace was broken, right? Here you have it. Now, maybe my scenario could be refined with many other different things to go along with it, but that would be a thing that could very likely take place. Now, notice, the only other person in the Bible who is described as blaspheming against God, proclaiming himself to be God, which is the greatest blasphemy of all, is it not? Okay, is found in 2 Thessalonians, the 2nd chapter. Correct? All right. And authority was given him to continue for 42 months. And he opened his mouth in blasphemy against God, to blaspheme his name and his tabernacle and those who dwell in heaven. Because he went in and took over the Holy of Holies in the temple. And power was given to him to make war against the saints. That's when the persecution really comes. And to overcome them. And he was given authority. Now notice, never has this happened. And he was given authority over every tribe and language and nation. Never happened. That's why John had to put in there in Matthew 24 and Mark 13, the one who reads, let him understand. Because you read all of this, and you look over in Jerusalem, and the temple is barren, desolate, not a stone upon a stone. See? Notice what else happens. And all, here we go with this all-inclusive word, see. All who dwell on the earth will worship him, whose names have not been written in the book of life of the Lamb slain from the foundation of the world. So the whole world is going to worship after the beast. If anyone has an ear, let him hear. So you see, here along comes his statement. If you hear this, the question remains, will we listen to other scriptures to put it together properly? Okay? We'll have to wait and see. All right, then we have the second beast, which is the one then who performed miracles. This is the false prophet. Okay. Now let's come back to Matthew 24 again, and let's see the sequence of events. And then we'll compare that again, this time with Luke 21. Matthew 24. Okay. Verse 14. Now, verse 14 is being done in a way of getting the Word of God out more than ever before to all the world. Now, I got a very interesting email from Andrew Moses, the new elder we have over in Malaysia. And there is a Indian family from India, and they left Hinduism and went into Protestantism for a while, but they couldn't understand it. So he's been talking with them, and here, there may be some people over there that God is going to deal with, see? So we're just one part of something great that God is doing. See? Now notice, and this gospel of the kingdom shall be proclaimed in all the world for a witness to all nations. What is that witness? That Christ came and died? Well, most of the world knows that. Whether they believe it or not, they've heard it. What is this witness? Christ is coming and he's going to take over the world. And he's going to put down all government. And he's going to establish the kingdom of God. And you have a chance to repent. And you have a chance to be in that kingdom. Okay? How do we know that? Well, we have what? The parable of the workers in the vineyard, right? Some were hired the first thing in the morning. They worked all day long. The owner of the vineyard went down to the marketplace a couple hours later, and there were other men standing around, hadn't been hired, they weren't working. So he hired them, sent them to the work in his vineyard. And the agreement was, I'll pay you what is right. He told the first group a silver coin. Everyone else, I'll pay you what is right. So then he went down there another time, did the same thing, and he came down probably like about 5 in the evening or 4:30, and there were still those who weren't hired. So he said, well, you go work in my vineyard. Well, maybe they worked till 6 o'clock or sundown, whatever, or just before sundown. Okay, if you're working in the vineyard, you're gathering grapes. This is going to be somewhere in the late summer, so sunset would probably be like what we would call about 8 o'clock. Not 9 o'clock, because they weren't on daylight saving time then. Okay. So he gathered them all and said, okay, you're going to get paid. And he told the paymaster, start with the last first. And each one of the last who worked an hour and a half got a silver coin. So it came to the ones who were hired first. They said, look, we've been out here working in the heat and all day and all the dust and dirt and grime and everything, and you're paying them the same as us? Little sidebar. We want to form a union. No. Okay? No. Okay? So the master of the vineyard said, I will do with my own as I please. The first shall be last, and the last shall be first. So, this witness goes out into all the world, last generation, then there are going to be some at the very last, which is typified by the Revelation 7, 144,000, great innumerable multitude. Okay? Boy, are they going to have a witness? Okay? One witness is that is included here is the one, Revelation 14. When everything is shut down that men can do, then God's going to send an angel to go around the world preaching the everlasting gospel and telling them to repent. I mean, we're looking at big time things, see? These are fantastic things that are going to take place. Okay? Then shall the end come. Therefore, when you see the abomination of desolation, which was spoken by Daniel the prophet standing in the holy place, the one who reads, let him understand. Now we have more understanding, right? Okay. Okay. Let those who are in Judea flee into the mountains. What do we have in Revelation 12? We have another group that is taken by angels and taken to a place of safety. Why? So the physical church wouldn't die out. Okay. Now, verse 21. For then there shall be great tribulation, such as has not been from the beginning of the world until this time, nor ever shall be again. And if those days were not limited, there would be no flesh would be saved. But for the elect's sake, those days shall be limited. Then if anyone says to you, behold, here's the Christ, isn't that what is going to be said? There's God in flesh. Or he's there. Do not believe it. For there shall arise false Christs and false prophets, and they shall present great signs and wonders in order to deceive, if possible, even the elect. Behold, I have foretold it to you. Therefore, if they say to you, come and see, he's in the wilderness, do not go forth. Come and see, he's in the secret chambers, do not believe. For as the light of day which comes forth from the east and shines as far as the west, so also shall the coming of the Son of Man be. That has not happened yet. Okay? So this is going to be something that everyone is going to see. Then he says, wherever the carcass may be, there will the eagles be gathered together. All right? Generally speaking, this is of a dead animal. Okay? But the point is, the angels are going to take us, so it's almost like the wings of eagles, with the angels taking us. And that can only be, I'm still not clear exactly how that verse works out. So I can't explain it clearly. But immediately after the tribulation of those days, the sun shall be dark, and the moon shall not give her light. Stars shall fall from heaven, and the powers of the heavens shall be shaken. Then shall appear the sign of the Son of Man in heaven. This, verse 27, is the sign of the Son of Man. Because the Bible does this many times. It tells us what it's going to be before it describes it. So that's what verse 27 is. Okay? Bear the sign of the Son of Man. Then shall all the tribes of the earth mourn, and they shall see the Son of Man coming upon the clouds of heaven with power and great glory. And he shall send his angels with a great sound of a trumpet, and they shall gather together his elect from the four winds, from one end of heaven to the other. Okay? Now then, let's read a couple more verses here. Now learn the parable from the fig tree. When its branches have already become tender and puts forth its leaves, you know that summer is near. In like manner also, when you see all these things, see, might want to circle all of these things. The abomination of desolation was the thing that was missing. All the rest of the things from verse 4 down through verse 13. All of those can be in cycles, cyclical. Let's look at history. Okay? What do you think that they thought when Genghis Khan and his hordes were coming from the east? How far did they get? They got right to the doorstep of Europe, right? Now you would look at that and you would think, whoa, here's the army of 200 million from Revelation if you had the Bible and could understand it. So that was a type. Okay? We've had wars. How many wars? Hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of wars. Okay? Now then, let's back down to a time as if we had no modern communications. No modern communications. You would never know when there's an earthquake in a faraway place. If there was a war in part of the world, you probably wouldn't hear of it at all. If there was a famine in some part of the world, you probably wouldn't know it. Okay? So, Matthew 24 also tells us that if it's going to be at the end time and everyone is going to know, therefore there has to be all the modern communications that we have now so that everyone will know. The greatest thing's going to happen in the history of the world since the first coming of Christ, going clear back to creation, as it says here, is coming on this world. And so I believe God has provided all of these things so that his people, whoever they are, wherever they are, that they, if they will be out preaching the gospel, teaching, that different ones will be able to be called and a witness will go out. Okay? Now then, that brings us back to the two witnesses where we started. Okay? So let's come back here to Revelation 11. So you see, that's why the Bible is such a fantastic and marvelous book, and why it takes the love of God, the truth of God, the Spirit of God, and studying the Scriptures and putting them together so that we understand what's going on. Okay, Revelation 11. And remember, Revelation was the last book of the Bible. It was a vision given to the Apostle John probably in 98 A.D. What happened was they martyred John because they wanted to kill him. So they had a big pot of boiling oil. So he was thrown into the boiling oil and nothing happened to him. Now, if you were the Roman soldiers standing around watching that, what would you think? Okay. So he was exiled to the island of Patmos. And there he was given the whole book of Revelation, which Christ told him to write. Okay? So that's why we have it. Now the two witnesses. Okay? Verse 3. And I will give power to my two witnesses. Now, if they are the two witnesses of God, Can any man set himself up as one of the two witnesses? Okay, one man set himself up as both of them. I mean, how crazy do people get? Okay. Okay. Don't you think God is going to call them? Yes, indeed. My two witnesses. And they shall prophesy 1,260 days, clothed with sackcloth. Now you compare that to all the splendor that the beast and the false prophet are going to have, okay? All right, let's ask another question. When does the 1,260 days end? When they're killed. When is that? Well, their bodies lie in the street 3.5 days, correct? So, at the end of that time, a voice comes from heaven, come up here, so they're raised from the dead. That's the beginning of the first resurrection, okay? So this is the resurrection on Pentecost, all right? So you can count backward. Now, if you look on the chart that I have with Daniel Revelation series, you will find that if you count backwards, you can't determine when they start by saying they start here and count forward. But you can determine from when it ends and when they're raised from the dead, that being Pentecost, you can count back what? Okay? 1,263.5 days. And that brings you to about the beginning of November. Okay? All right, so you get that chart and look at that chart. Very interesting. And a lot of these things, you have to go from the ending and count back because you don't know where the beginning is. Now, when I originally did that chart, the reason that I did the chart was this, okay? Up here in verse 2, it says, and they shall trample the holy city for 42 months. And, as we read in Revelation 13, he continues for 42 months, right? So I asked the question, why did God say 42 months and difference of 1,260 days? And then all of those who study prophecy say that 42 months is 1,260 days. Why would God give two different ways of calculating? Okay? And besides, some of the months would be 29 days and some would be 30, correct? So you would come up with a different number of days. Okay? What is the answer? How do you figure about when this starts? The same way we just figured for the two witnesses. You ask the question, when does the beast and false prophet die? Trumpets. When Christ and the saints come back to the earth. So you count back 42 months. Guess where that falls? Right around Passover time. What do you think the Jews are doing at the temple? Offering their Passover lambs. Would that not be an opportune day for the beast to go in there and stop everything? Stop the sacrifice? Go into the Holy of Holies and say, I am God? Okay? So that's how I counted back. Very interesting. Also did another thing. I used the time of the calculated Hebrew calendar. And I also did something else. The end is the end. The end is the end. The end is the end. Correct? All right. So I said, how am I going to figure this? Well, if it's the end, could it be that it is at the end of a 19-year time cycle? I don't know, but that's what I did, which means that last year is how many months? 13 months. Okay? So that's how I developed the chart and plugged everything in that way, you see. Another thing, the four angels' message in Revelation 14, the first one is preaching the gospel. Forget what the second one is. But the third one is, don't get the mark of the beast. Now, when do you warn not to take the mark of the beast? At the beginning of the 3.5 years, or maybe a little before that? You certainly can't do it a few days before the resurrection. So that has to be before the beast goes into the temple saying he's God. All right, let's go on. We'll finish this with the two witnesses. And a sidebar back here. Now notice how powerful they are. And if anyone attempts to harm them, fire will go out of their mouths and devour their enemies. Just came to me. If anyone says he's the two witnesses, tell him, let's see you breathe fire. You can't breathe fire? You're a fake. Okay? But I can spit. No. For if anyone attempts to harm them, he must be killed in this manner. They have authority to shut up or to shut heavens so that no rain may fall in the days of their prophecy. They have authority over the waters to turn them into blood and to smite the earth with every plague as often as they will. Now, how's that for carte blanche authority, huh? Okay. When they have completed their testimony, the beast that ascends out of the abyss shall make war against them, overcome them, and kill them, and their bodies will lie in the street of the great city called Sodom and Egypt, where also our Lord was crucified. Okay? Whole world's going to see it. Well, if this is going to happen and all this modern technology that we have is still working, then through all of the difficulties that's going on the earth, God keeps those satellites in place. Okay? Now, can God do that? Yes. Because he wants everyone to see. All right? Now, come back to verse 4. These are the two olive trees and the two lampstands that stand before the God of the earth. All right, come back here to Zechariah 3. Zechariah 3. Everyone wants to know, who are the two witnesses? God is going to choose them, and if anyone says, I'm one of the two witnesses, or two people come along and say, we are the two witnesses, just tell them, look forward to their appointment in the theological place of ever burning. Okay. All right. I'll just summarize chapter 3. Joshua the high priest. Chapter 3, verse 1. And he showed me Joshua the high priest standing before the angel of the Lord, and Satan standing at his right hand to resist him. Now, this sounds just like the conversion of Saul to Paul. Bang! Happens right at once. And the Lord said to Satan, may the Lord rebuke you. May the Lord, even the Lord, who has chosen Jerusalem, rebuke you. Is this not a brand plucked out of the fire? In other words, someone really deep into sin. Now Joshua was clothed with filthy garments and stood before the angel. What are filthy garments a type of? Sin. And he answered and spoke to those who stood before him, saying, take the filthy garments from off him. And he said to him, behold, I have caused your iniquities to pass from you, and I will clothe you with ceremonial robes. And set a clean mitre on his head. And they set a clean mitre on his head and clothed him with garments. And the angel of the Lord stood, showing it's going to be the high priest. By time the ministry begins, it's what? Sackcloth. Okay? Now, you come down here, and it shows that, verse 8, hear now, O Joshua the high priest, you and your fellows who sit before you, for they are men wondered at. For, behold, I will bring forth my servant, the branch. That's the return of Christ. Now come over here to chapter 4. Okay? Let's pick it up in verse 1. And the angel that talked with me came again and awakened me, as a man that is awakened out of his sleep. And he said to me, what do you see? And he said, I see and behold a lampstand, all of it gold, and a bowl on the top, and 7 lamps on it, and 7 pipes to the 7 lamps on its top. Now this is a special one. This is not like the one that was given in the book of Exodus for the 7 lamps. This is different. Now notice, verse 3, and the 2 olive trees beside it. These are the 2 olive trees, Revelation 11. One on the right side of the bowl and the other on the other side of the bowl. And I answered and spoke to the angel who talked with me, saying, what are these, my Lord? Then the angel who talked with me answered and said to me, do you know who these are? Notice, these, the high priest, plus these 2 bowls, plus the olive trees. And he said, no, my Lord. And he answered and spoke to me, saying, this is the word of the Lord to Zerubbabel. Now, who was Zerubbabel? Zerubbabel was the governor of Judea. And Zerubbabel was the son of Shealtiel. And they were of the line of David, which, if the kingship was still in Judah, would have been king. But he is governor. So this is the word of the Lord to Zerubbabel, saying, not by might nor by power, but by my spirit, says the Lord. Okay? That's what the 2 witnesses are going to be, filled with God's Spirit, performing all of those things. Who are you, O great mountain, before Zerubbabel? Type of David and Goliath, right? The great mountain, the great beast. You shall become like a plain. He shall bring forth the head of the stone with shoutings, grace, grace unto it. Who is that stone that the builders rejected? Okay. Psalm 118, Christ. Grace, grace unto them. And the word of the Lord came to me, saying, the hands of Zerubbabel have laid the foundation of this house, so they'll be involved in building the temple. And his hand shall also finish it. Dual prophecy, the second temple, and then the 3rd temple at the end. And you shall know that the Lord of hosts has sent me to you. For who has despised the day of small things? For they shall rejoice and see the plummet in the hand of Zerubbabel, and those 7 are the eyes of the Lord, which run to and fro through the whole earth. And I answered and said to him, what are these 2 olive trees on the right side of the lampstand and on its left side? And I answered again and said to him, what are the 2 olive branches beside the 2 golden pipes, emptying the golden oil out of themselves? And he answered and said to me, do you not know what these are? And I said, no, my Lord. And he said, these are the 2 anointed ones who stand by the Lord of the whole earth. So there you have the 2 witnesses, the governor of Judea and the coming high priest. Now, when Netanyahu, and Dolores has said this quite a few times, but when Netanyahu came to give the speech before Congress, we looked at him, and it's true. As governor of Judea, he would make a wonderful witness. Okay, he would. See? But imagine, that's when God sets his hand to really, really do things. So, the 2 witnesses are not in Jerusalem, and they are not down in the archaeological dig looking for things. Okay. Now we know that we need to take these prophecies and be very careful how we handle them. And what we don't understand, we don't understand. What we do understand, we must put it properly together. So we'll call it the end of this study, and see you next Sabbath.